This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 433, entitled Sage Women's Understanding of Masculist Arguments, but not of Masculist Rage. Description. This flyer tries to explain why sage, that is intellectual, women can readily understand the arguments of the masculists, but seem to lack an intuitive emotional understanding of why masculists have such an anger and hatred towards certain categories of women, especially towards fluffy man-slaving parasites and fluffy feminist hypocrites. Several possible explanations are given. Now the flyer itself. Sage women's understanding of masculist arguments, but not of masculist rage, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. I have a Latin girlfriend, that is, we live a Latin, that is, living apart together, lifestyle. She has her own house with a beautiful garden, which is greatly superior in standard than my typical 5-room apartment. She has her own life and abode that she does not want to move from, and I am a MGTOW masculist who does not want to risk another living together full-time relationship, so live the 4-3 Latin lifestyle, that is 4 days/nights together per week, mostly at her house, which is in an outer suburb of Melbourne, the city we live in. And I live in an inner suburb, so she comes to my apartment once a fortnight for a usually Japanese dinner and a movie. I choose to live the Latin lifestyle with 3 days/nights a week apart from her to take advantage of the Latin lifestyle, which now in the UK a quarter of so-called singles choose to live by. It's a lifestyle that is becoming increasingly popular as standards of living rise and people can afford to have their own place, especially fit, that's financially independent person, women who have bothered to become career competent and can afford to have their own apartment, or better still, their own suburban house. Full-time relationships are risky for a man, since I strongly suspect that women evolved to nag, which in the distant past would have given women the means to extract more resources from her man, who would give her more meat than he would have liked, just to shut her up from being a nagging bitch. I've had 4 wives, mostly for visa reasons. My own mother and my 4th wife were both nags. I suspect that my 4th wife had a BPD, borderline personality disorder, who came at me one time with a meat cleaver. If I had not been a strong male who could simply hold her arms apart until she tired, she could have done me serious damage that would have put her in jail, and maybe me in a coffin. So I know about female nagging. I'm convinced that women play a major role in the causation of domestic violence with their incessant, insufferable nagging that brings a man to explosion point, who then, if he's not strongly self-controlled, can explode, using his 3 times greater strength across the chest than the average woman to inflict real physical damage on her. However, common sense says that a woman can pull a trigger or stab as easily as a man, so it's to be expected that the spousal murder rate of the 2 sexes should be about equal, and it is. according to a Canadian study I read some time back, which claimed that for every 4 husbands who murdered their wives, there were 3 wives who murdered their husbands, so roughly equal. But if you listen to the typical gender bias of the monoconscious feminists, you get the impression that domestic violence is a one-way street. Yes, men do more physical damage on women than vice versa due to their much greater strength, which, by the way, women sexually selected in men over thousands of generations so as to have men who could better protect them and their kids from other men. However, I do believe that women play a more important role than men in causing the domestic violence by nagging their man to explosion point. Fortunate for me, and also due to the Latin lifestyle I choose to lead, my girlfriend does not nag. She also knows why I live the Latin lifestyle that she too chooses, because she has her own nice house that she does not want to move from, etc. At the time of writing, May 2021, I have been with her for nearly a year, so this is a rather new relationship. She does not nag, she is nurturative, and she is sage, that is, an intellectual who thinks and reads a ton. Who, in other words, is my type of woman, that is, nurturative, fip, and sage. Thus she is not a fluffie, a masculinist term for a traditional woman who expects to be able to parasite off the labour and money of a man, making her, in masculinist eyes, an immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin to be wiped out by being totally ignored, not even pumped and dumped, thus forced to rot on the shelf so that her fluffy parasite genes are removed from the gene pool. Masculists see fluffydom as manslavery, and manslavery as slavery, and hence hated. Masculists have a hatred of fluffy manslavers and an even greater hatred of fluffy feminists who want equal rights for women in the parliaments but behave as fluffy parasites in the divorce courts, rejecting equal obligations with men in sharing equally the burden of earning the living, but don't by acting as fluffy parasite manslavers in the divorce courts, making themselves utterly hated by the masculists, who also aim to wipe out such women, exterminating them slowly by totally ignoring them. Today's feminists are monoconscious, that is, they have only had their feminist consciousness raised, that is, they are not bi-conscious, that is, they have not had both their feminist and their masculinist consciousnesses raised. That is, they are unaware, unconscious of how women oppress men, especially with their fluffy manslaving expectation of men that most women have. That is, their deeply ingrained expectation of men that, quote, "Men exist on this earth to pay for women to have babies." The essence of masculism is that it's a rebellion by men against being man-slaves to women, working for women for decades of a man's life. With the fluffy feminist takeover of the divorce courts in the 70s, divorce now is so toxic for men that in many countries 70% of young men refuse to marry, reject paternity, and spend their money on themselves. That is, they have chosen to live the MGTOW, men going their own way, lifestyle. That makes these fluffy feminist hypocrites who have taken over the divorce courts indirect genociders, since they are the primary cause of the marriage and paternity strike of the majority of young men. My girlfriend is thus probably the planet's first real female masculist. She's familiar with the arguments mentioned above and knows that women have the MARA, that's maternity rejection rate, aka abortion rate, but that men don't have the PARA, paternity rejection rate, since men are seen by women and by traditional society as cash machines. Quote, "Who exist on this earth to pay for women to have babies." She knows all this and can see the logic of it all, so accepts the idea that she is a female masculist in the sense that I'm a male feminist, that is, that giving both sexes equal rights and opportunities is merely humane, civilized, and she agrees with the masculists that the divorce courts are crime scenes against men, that the para should be legislated, that women should be raised to be FIPs, etc. She is in agreement with most of the masculist claims. Thus it is fair to say that she is indeed a female masculist, and hence one of, and perhaps even the planet's first, female masculist, since she is getting her masculist input from the horse's mouth, so to speak, that is from the guy who has dreamt up so much of the masculist political and social program. But, and there is a but, I am puzzled by her aversion to masculist anger and hatred of certain categories of women, namely fluffies, that is, fluffy manslaving parasites, and fluffy feminist hypocrites, in brackets, who want equal rights with men, but reject equal obligations with men by not bothering to get a career-competent education that will give her a diploma that the economy values and pays well for, so allowing such women to be FIPs as adults and not parasiting off the money and labour of a man, making her a hated, manslaving parasite. I wonder why my girlfriend has this, to me, odd attitude. I fail to understand why she doesn't have an intuitive, emotional understanding of masculist hatred of these categories of women, and hence despise them to the same degree as masculists do, and for similar reasons. What is going on? I can think of several possible explanations. The most obvious one is that she has simply not had enough exposure to masculist ideas to overcome her half-century monoconscious conditioning by feminist attitudes. She is the same age as me, 73. So she too was a young adult when the second wave of feminism was launched in the late 60s. She saw the radical rise of feminism and saw how revolutionary it was in converting women's gender role from housewifery to female careerism, all in only a few years. I believe that this decade, masculism will go through a similar process as millions of masculists transform society by putting enormous moral pressure on young women to FIP up or be powerfully punished by young men by being forced to rot on the shelf. Masculists want a masculist group to be set up in every high school, every campus, so that young men can pressure their female classmates to FIP up or be crossed off socially and sexually by men as manslaving, fluffy vermin. My girlfriend strongly dislikes the anger and hatred coming from the masculists against the above two female groups of fluffy manslaving parasites and the fluffy feminist hypocrites. Could it be that the MGTOWs are right when they talk about, in quotes, female same group preference? That is, the idea that in the distant past women evolved to show real solidarity amongst women, since if a woman lost her male manslave, that is, her hunter of meat, then instead of she and her baby simply starving, she could rely on the support and meat supply from other women in the tribe or hunter-gatherer band to keep her alive. It does sound plausible. That is, when masculists attack fluffies and fluffy feminists, she feels that masculists are attacking women in general, which goes against her evolved female same-group preference. ? This seems irrational to male masculists, but it may be a strongly evolved value in a woman's brain. ? Another possible explanation is that women evolved a real fear of male anger and hatred towards women. In the distant past, there was no police force, so if a woman really pissed off a man or the men in her group, there would be nothing to stop a man or the men in her group from simply killing her. So women may have evolved to fear men and to tread lightly in their presence, being heavily dependent on them for meat and for sex to have the babies they strongly wanted due to a deep female reproductive instinct, but dared not challenge men through fear of being physically damaged or even killed by an enraged, angry, hateful male. It was women who sexually selected men to be this way, that is, taller, stronger, bigger, fiercer and smarter than women, since it was in women's self-interest to sexually select such men, since such men would be more able to defend their woman and also his kids against other men, so that the odds would be higher that his woman and her kids would survive. This is the end of part 1.